Open your book to page 296. So today's lesson is on how to evaluate the inverse trigonometric function. And so we did the sine, cosine, tangent, the inverse, right? So today we're going to learn how to evaluate the inverse cotangent, inverse secant, and inverse cosecant. So let's go to page 296. Let's go to example 1. A. You want to evaluate arc cotangent of -1. What you want to do is, remember, whenever you see inverse function, right away you have to think of an angle. So you need to go and use that to draw a triangle to figure out what angle this is. Okay. So go ahead and draw your triangle. So negative cosine is going to be in quadrant 2. So it's negative. So cosine is cotangent is cosine over sine. And so you're going to get this, so -1/1, right? Cosine over sine. And so this would be square root of 2. So by looking at that triangle, you need to figure out what is the angle of that. So the angle of that would be from here to here, that's 3 pi over 4. So 3 pi over 4, and that's your answer. So just like what we did before, right? So go ahead and use that to draw your triangle and look at the triangle to figure out the angle. Now let's go to B, example 1B. You have inverse secant of 2 over square root of 3. Same thing, so draw your triangle. So secant is the reciprocal of cosine, right? So that means the horizontal is square root of 3. And the hypotenuse is 2. Secant is reciprocal of cosine, right? So cosine is horizontal, so it's horizontal over hypotenuse, so horizontal over hypotenuse. And so this would be a 1. So by looking at that triangle, okay, this is the 30-degree triangle, right? Over here, 30 degree over here. So that means it's pi over 6. And that's your answer. So make sure you'll be familiar with your triangle and the location of all the angles. Let's go to example 2. Example 2, it says find the exact value of tangent of inverse secant of -3. So you need to go and do it step by step. So this is your angle theta. So let's go and draw this triangle. So you can secant is reciprocal of cosine. So cosine is horizontal over hypotenuse, and so it's going to be in quadrant 2. So it'd be -1. So it'd be -1 over 3. And so this would be 2 square root of 2. So that's your angle. So that's your triangle. So that's the angle. So that's your angle theta, right? So now you have to look at this picture to figure out what's tangent of that. Remember, this is the tangent theta, right? So that is the theta. And so theta is right over here. So look at this picture. What is the tangent of that picture? So tangent is sine over cosine. So it'd be 2 square root of 2 over -1. So it'd be 2 square root of 2 over -1. So equal to -2 square root of 2. So again, inverse function is an angle. Inverse function is an angle. The regular function, so inverse function is an angle, and the regular function of the angle is a number. So make sure you get that square away. Don't get confused. The next thing is you have to know how to evaluate using calculator, and make sure you know the relationship between the primary function and the secondary function. So you have so notice that normally you got sine of x, right? And the secondary function, so that, for example, you got cosecant. If you want to evaluate cosecant, cosecant is equal to 1 over sine x, right? And secant is 1 over cosine of x. And cotangent is equal to 1 over tangent of x. Right, so when you're using the calculator, when you have a cosecant, you have to convert into 1 over sine, and whatever the number is, you enter in the calculator and you do the reciprocal, right? Now, for the inverse function, it's very similar, but a lot of students get confused. So when you have an inverse cosecant, this is equal to inverse sine of 1 over x. Okay, so again, similar, but make sure you don't get confused between the two. So when you have inverse function, you take the reciprocal of the number first, then you take the inverse function of that. Okay, same thing with the inverse secant. This is equal to inverse cosine of 1 over x. And inverse cotangent, this is equal to inverse tangent of 1 over x. So in other words, when you deal with inverse function, you need to go and take the reciprocal of the inside first before you use a calculator to do that function. And if you go to page 297, if you notice, you have inverse cotangent of x equal to inverse tangent of 1 over x. That is when it's positive, when x is positive. Okay, so this is the inverse tangent, inverse cotangent, you have to be very, very careful. So that's additional things you have to be aware of. And you have to add pi if the x is negative. So if x is negative, this will be in the wrong quadrant, so you have to add pi to get into within the boundary. Okay. So let's go over some examples. Let's go to example 3. Inverse cotangent of 4.05. Now, if you look on your calculator, there is no inverse. There's no inverse cotangent, right? So you need to convert. So first, make into inverse tangent of 1 over 4.05. After that, you need to go and use a calculator for that. So you need to know how to enter your calculator. So for me, I would have to do 1 divided by 4.05. I push equal. Oh, make sure your calculator is in the radian mode. And then you go to second tangent. And so this will equal to 0.242. If you go 4 decimal places, 4 digit, then it will be 1. Okay. Or it says 3 decimal. So just follow the instruction, okay, and that's it. Okay, now let's go to B. Inverse cosecant of negative 12. So again, that's on the calculator, there's no cosecant, right? So you need to convert that into inverse sine. And you have to flip this over. So get your calculator. So 1 divided by 12 negative equal, and go secant sine. So this will equal to negative 0.083. And that's it. Okay. Okay, so let's go and do some practice.